You wake up, pull on a shirt, and fasten a row of tiny plastic discs. You probably don't think twice about them, but those buttons are holding your entire civilization together. If you lost them, your clothes would slide off, your status would crumble, and you would be left completely exposed to the elements. The button is an unsung hero of human history. It is a tiny piece of technology that transformed how we dress, how we look, and how we function. But for most of human history, buttons didn't exist at all. So, how did we go from wrapping ourselves in animal hides to clicking ourselves into a polished aesthetic? To find the first button, we had to travel back 5,000 years. We are looking at the Indus Valley Civilization, in what is now modern-day Pakistan. Archaeologists have uncovered decorative discs made of seashells that date back to 2800 BCE. They had holes drilled into them, but they weren't used to hold fabric together. They were ornaments. They were sewn onto garments like jewelry, worn to signal status or wealth. For thousands of years, humans were quite content using other methods to keep their clothes on. We relied on brooches, pins, buckles, and belts. If you lived in ancient Rome or Greece, you were likely wearing a toga or a tunic pinned at the shoulder with a fibula. A fibula was essentially a fancy safety pin. It worked, but it had a nasty habit of poking you if you moved too quickly. So, when did we finally figure out that a toggle through a loop was better than a sharp metal spike? The transition happened in Europe during the 13th century. This was the era of the Crusades and a massive expansion in trade. As soldiers and merchants moved across borders, they brought new ideas back home. Specifically, they brought the idea of the button as a functional fastener rather than just a piece of decoration. In the 13th century, European fashion underwent a radical change. Tailors began cutting fabric much closer to the body. Before this, clothing was baggy and loose. You didn't need a fastener if your tunic was essentially a giant bag. But once the silhouette became fitted, baggy fabric was useless. You needed a way to close the gap at the wrist, the neck, and the chest. Enter the buttonhole. Once you have a button in a hole that perfectly matches its size, you have a seal. This was a revolution. It meant clothes could be made to fit the human form precisely. It meant you could get dressed without the help of a servant pinning you into your clothes every morning. By the 14th century, buttons had exploded in popularity. They became a symbol of extreme wealth. If you were a king or a wealthy merchant, you didn't just have a functional button. You had a button made of gold, silver, or carved ivory. Some elite men wore rows of buttons down their sleeves simply to show off how much they could afford. It was the medieval equivalent of driving a supercar. The demand was so high that guilds started forming specifically for button makers. There were button makers for metal, button makers for silk, and button makers for wood. The industry became highly specialized. France, in particular, became the center of the fashion world, establishing button making as a high art craft. Then came the Enlightenment. By the 18th century, buttons weren't just functional, they were political statements. People began commissioning buttons with painted portraits, hidden messages, or intricate engravings. You could wear your political loyalty, your love interest, or your family crest right on your cuff. But there is a lingering mystery that people often ask about. Why are buttons on opposite sides for men and women? If you look at a man's shirt, the buttons are on the right. On a woman's shirt, they are on the left. Theories abound. Some historians suggest it dates back to when men carried swords. If you are right-handed and wearing a sword on your left hip, you want your shirt to button from the left to right so that your sword hilt doesn't catch in the opening of your jacket when you draw it. It was a tactical necessity. For women, it's a different story. In the 18th and 19th centuries, wealthy women were dressed by servants. If the servant is standing in front of you, the buttons need to be on the opposite side so that they can easily fasten them while facing you. It was a visual quirk of the aristocratic class that eventually trickled down into mass manufacturing and simply stuck around, like a ghost in the machine of history. The real shift toward the button we know today, the cheap, mass-produced plastic disc, didn't happen until the Industrial Revolution. Before the 19th century, every button was a piece of craftsmanship. You had to carve it, mold it, or sew it by hand. As steam power took over, machines began punching out thousands of buttons an hour from horn, bone, and eventually celluloid. Suddenly, the button wasn't just for kings. It was for everyone. By the early 20th century, the button was ubiquitous. It fueled the rise of the modern work shirt, the suit jacket, and the cardigan. It became the default setting for human closure. Today, we are seeing the slow decline of the button. We have zippers, which are faster. We have Velcro, which is more convenient. We have snaps and magnets and elastic. We are moving toward a world of slip-on technology where the effort of dressing is minimized to almost zero. In a fast-paced society, pausing to fasten 12 tiny discs can feel like an inconvenience. Yet, the button persists. It remains a staple of high fashion and professional attire. Why? Because a zipper is just a mechanical track, but a button is a deliberate action. It is tactile. It requires a moment of focus. It is a ritual. Every morning, when you engage in that small, repetitive task, you are participating in a tradition that transformed the human body from a loose collection of drapery into a tailored, controlled, and distinctly modern silhouette. We have spent 5 millennia perfecting this tiny piece of hardware. We took a decorative shell from the Indus Valley and turned it into the structural anchor of the global garment industry. From status symbols for medieval knights to the plastic circles holding your favorite shirt together, the button is proof that the smallest inventions often have the most significant impact on how we inhabit our own lives. Think about that the next time you find yourself fumbling with your cuffs. You aren't just getting dressed, you are engaging in a 5,000-year-old engineering project designed to keep you from falling apart. If we ever stop using them, we won't just be losing a fastener, we will be losing one of the quietest, yet most persistent, marks of civilization. What tiny, overlooked object will replace the button next, and will it define the next 5,000 years as clearly as this one did?